all my life was wrecked by sin and strife. This part filled my heart with pain. Jesus wept across the broken stream, stirred the stumbling chords again. And Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fill my every longing and keep me singing as I go. Now, if you hadn't had a chance to smile today, you ought to on the last stanza. Soon he's coming back. Soon he's coming back to welcome me. Far beyond the starry sky, I shall wing my flight to worlds unknown. I shall reign with him on high. And Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, and fill my every longing, for he keeps me singing as I go. Oh, you may be seated tonight. Good to see everyone here. We're going to, I'll make some announcements, going to forego the mission letter tonight because we got three gifts to cover, because I don't want this to go past missions conference, because that starts next week. So we've got to move briskly this evening. Of course, the main announcement is next Wednesday night. Let's start the missions conference. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time. Got the missionaries excited about being here, and had another talk with one of them this week. And so Sunday will be our last big prep day. If you haven't signed up yet, please do so. If you can host one for dinner, or take one to dinner, or get together with somebody and host someone together for dinner, I encourage you to do that. And I know you hear me say that a lot, but it is a blessing to get to know these families, and so I encourage you to do that if at all possible. And you'll enjoy their fellowship, and you'll learn something too about the field they're going to and what God's call on their life, and it'll be neat. Right now, as we're looking, we'll actually have the books ready to go out Sunday, so we'll have our mission books ready before missions conference this year. Kind of nice. We're asking at the beginning one per family, please, because there's a little bit of an expense in printing them, and so one book per family would be great if you can hold off and do that for us. And it's got all the missionaries in there. There's a little bit of a bio, a little bit about the field they're going to, and then some other little tidbits from the week. And so that booklet will be ready. Faith Promise Missions cards will also be ready on Sunday, and they'll be printed and on the back table. And Brother David Isabel has the service Sunday morning. Brother Isabel was a missionary for 10 years in South Africa, and so he's gonna shed a little different light on Faith Promise from the point of view of a missionary on the field. And so he'll be speaking Sunday morning, and then Sunday night we'll be back in the area of the prodigal son, it looks like. And so that's kind of the schedule for Sunday. And then, of course, again, next week it all kicks off and it all starts. There's also a sign-up sheet back there for the Faith Promise Day meal, the lunch after church. Again, church will take care of meats and stuff that day and bread and stuff. We just ask you help with sides and desserts, and that sign-up sheet is back there as well. All right. And Kim's been collecting stuff for the purses, and then, well, between her and Amy, they've been collecting stuff for the purses. And so, have y'all just about got everything in? They're getting full, I hear that, you know. Amen. All right. So that'll be a lot of fun. We'll hand those things off next Wednesday night to our missionaries, and we'll start them off that way. All right. Come ready. Of course, they'll present their needs every night, and so come ready to write that stuff down. Ms. Melba will be here to do a lot of that dictation, and we'll make sure every night you get an updated sheet. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, every night the missionaries will get up, and they will each member of the family will present a need/want. It could be anything from the husband saying, I need dress shirts, to them saying, we need clothes for the kids, or something, or we need help with homeschool material, or, we've had all the way up to my laptop just blew up. I mean, we've had a wide range of things presented, and I tell you what, it's neat to get the opportunity to meet those needs during the week, and that's what that allows us to do. I know the youth department always steps up and helps out with some of the kids in the group and helps meet those needs with them. And so that you'll hear a different need every night from every member of the family. And basically, we will put together what I call it our springtime Christmas list, and it'll be handed to you every evening, and an opportunity to meet the needs of our missionary families. All right. Let's dive right back into it. Romans chapter number 12. Romans chapter number 12. Romans chapter number 12. We're going to cover the last three spiritual gifts tonight. We'll go over go over like we have the others. Let's pick it up in verse number 8. It says, or he that exhorteth on exhortation, or he that giveth, we're going to talk about that tonight, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence, he that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. And then if you look down, as we continue down looking, you'll see that when we talk about giving, verse 13, distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. When in verse 14, we talk a little bit about the gift of ruling or organization. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Why? Because if you're in the charge leading something, you're going to get persecuted. I've never met a leader yet that didn't catch flack from somebody for something they were doing. And so that just kind of goes with it. And then verse number 15, rejoice with them that do rejoice and weep with them that do weep. And of course that talks about the gift of mercy. And so let's look at the gift of giving tonight. The gift of giving, and our example for this may surprise you. And there may be some others you can come up with. This is the one that as I studied out and studied the different ones people had mentioned, this one made the most sense to me, but it's going to be shocking. Matthew. And that may be shocking because you're looking at that going, wasn't that guy a tax collector? I've never really heard of a tax collector having a giving spirit. But as we talk about some of the things that mark a giver, you're going to see some things in his gospel that kind of rear their heads, so to speak. And so, characteristics of a giver. All right, let's look at first of all, let's look at the definition. Let me get my thing. The definition: the motivation to incur. So that's exhortation. Wait a minute, let me get through that. Giving. Here we go. The motivation to gain assets and share them with others in and for the work of the Lord. The motivation to gain assets and share them with others in and for the work of the Lord. Or as one man put it, it is the God-given ability to give, to be able to make quick decisions regarding the immediate needs of others, and to entrust personal assets to others for the furtherance of the spiritual ministry. I'll say that one more time. To be able to make quick decisions regarding the immediate needs of others and to entrust personal assets to others for the furtherance of their gospel ministry. A giver must take a genuine interest in the needs of others and giving to their necessities. So let's look at the characteristics of a giver. Number one, a giver has an ability to discern wise investments. His motivation is to use assets of time, money, and possessions to advance the work of the Lord. Givers just have an innate ability to find ways to make wise investments. That's just, they can kind of sniff it out, so to speak. If a person with the gift of giving has limited funds, he is able to use his ability of recognizing available resources and draw upon them when needed. The giver is the guy that can take and squeeze blood out of a turnip. You ever heard that old saying? A giver can do that. All right, they can figure out how to make that penny go extra 4 miles if they need it to. That's the gift of giving. All right, they're very good with that, and they're very good with their investments. And actually, they're very good at gaining assets. That's not a problem for them. Usually, givers are good at gaining assets because they turn around and then use those and give them away for ministry's sake. So that's something that they're able to do. They also have a tendency, number two, to invest themselves with their gift. In other words, when they give, they're not just giving money, they're investing themselves into whatever they're giving. They see it as a very personal thing. A giver needs continuous reassurance that his decisions are in God's will, whether he has little or much to give. The giver wants to make sure that he's giving the right thing to the right people. He needs that assurance to make sure he's doing what's right. And by the way, to achieve this, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, he will first give himself to the Lord, then his gift. It very much is a situation where they invest themselves with their money or whatever gift it is. They're committed. They're in it. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, Paul writes about those churches of Macedonia, how they first gave their own selves to the Lord as unto us by the will of God. That's the idea of a giver. All right, it's not just giving the money; it's a giving of themselves. It really is. Number three, they desire to give high quality. They want to make sure their gift is a good gift. That's important to them. The giver's ability to discern value motivates him to provide quality gifts, and they are very good at discerning value. In Matthew, we were talking about Matthew being an example. Matthew recorded in greater detail than any other gospel the gifts that were given to Christ. As a matter of fact, he's the only writer who mentioned gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The only one that mentioned those gifts. All right? No one else did. He's also the one who mentioned Mary's ointment and called it very precious, and talked about the value of that ointment. He's also the one that when talking about Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, he made mention it was a new tomb. He put that little extra, he didn't have to say that, but he wanted to make sure everybody knew it was never laid in. It was a new tomb. Matthew stressed that in his gospel. Some things that other writers did not stress that he did. Number four, someone with this gift, they really want their gift to be an answer to prayer. When they give something, there's nothing that thrills them more than to find out that whatever it was they give was something that the person had been praying for, or that their gift met a need that the person's been praying about. A giver who is in fellowship with the Lord will be prompted to give even when there's not an obvious need. The Lord will lead them to give in a situation where people won't, that the need's not obvious, and it may be something that not everybody knows about, but that this person's been praying about, and the Lord will lay on their heart to give, and they'll do it, and the person will go, you'll have no idea, I've been praying about this. And when someone, that just throws fire on a giver. I mean, that fires them up. When they know that their gift was a direct answer to prayer, they really love that. Another thing givers do, they desire to give secretly. In other words, I'm going to give this, but don't let them know where it came from. And I've had that several times. People give to a cause, but they don't want to be named. They don't want people to know. That's the desire of a giver. They desire to give secretly. They want the Lord's direction, and they want the recipients not to look at them, but they want the recipients of the gift to look to the Lord and to be thankful to God, not to put them in a place where they're thankful to them instead of the Lord. And so the giver will back away and let God get the glory for what is done. Out of all of the gospel writers, when Matthew recorded the Sermon on the Mount, and by the way, Luke recorded portions of the Sermon on the Mount too, but when Matthew recorded that sermon, he's the only one who recorded the verses in chapter 6 about giving secretly. When you give, don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. Don't be magnanimous about it. Don't be braggadocious about it, but to give secretly. Matthew stressed that in his gospel. That was something that was brought out regarding the Sermon on the Mount. So they desire to give secretly. They don't want people to look to them instead of looking to God. They want to make sure God gets the glory. They also have a concern, and they understand the destructiveness of the love of money. They're very, very aware that money can be destructive. A giver is. And they understand that concept. And so they're very careful with it. They want to make sure that when they do give, they don't want to do anything that would lead the person they're giving to in a bad direction, because they understand like a large gift or something could be used for the wrong purpose or could be used for the wrong reason. They're very cautious about that because they understand that the love of money is the root of all evil, and a giver is very sensitive to that. All right? They are very thrifty. The personal assets which the giver has are often the result of consistent personal frugality. Givers, you know why they have money to give? Because they are frugal people. All right? Frugal people. And because they're frugal people, they are able to be a blessing to someone else, and that means something to them. The giver may provide matching funds or something along that. When someone's giving, they want to encourage other people to give. So a giver may say, I'll match the offerings for da-da-da-da-da, trying to encourage others to take part in giving as well. But a giver, they know how to get the best buy. They know how to find the deal. They know how to find the little gem that nobody else knows is there. They know how to find the good deal and the discount. They're good at that. They hone in on things like that. Because saving money means they have more resources to give later on. And that's the way, if I save money on myself, I have more to give somebody else or more to give to the ministry. And that's the way a giver thinks. And they also want to confirm amount with counsel. Givers are big before they give. They like to take counsel that what they're doing is right. They want to confirm. A lot of times, if it's a husband and wife, the giver will go to the spouse and talk to them and confirm to them what's going on and what the Lord's laid on their heart. Givers want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. They want to make sure that what they're giving is correct. And so they'll seek counsel about a gift before they give it. Now, here's some misuses, and we'll go, and I know I'm moving pretty quick, but again, we got to cover 3 of these tonight. Here's some misuses. Number 1, if a giver ever gets out of fellowship with God, if they ever get out of fellowship with God, then that collection of resources can become a hoarding of resources for themselves. So it's very, very important that a giver remain in fellowship with the Lord. Otherwise, it can become a hoarding situation where they're bringing in the resources, but they're not giving them out. And so that's a danger. The second thing is, if a giver's not careful, their gifts can come across as being used to control people. I would love to give to the remodeling of so-and-so room. I would love to cover that. I really like gray carpet. You kind of follow what I'm saying. If they're not careful, their gifts can become a control measure. And they can use their giving as a control measure to get what they want, all right? Or as we call it, politics. That's a good word for it today. Another thing that givers have to be careful of, because they enjoy giving high quality, they have to be careful that when they give, they do not force a higher standard of living on the one that's receiving the gift. In other words, the one that's receiving the gift gets something really nice, something they would never be able to do for themselves, and that brings them to a point where I got a little taste of that now. I want to live that way when they can't afford to live that way, and it's almost like they're adopting a higher standard of living than what they can afford to do. And so a giver has to make sure that when they do give, they want to give a high-quality gift, but you're not putting an undue burden on someone else by opening them up to a realm that they can't afford to live in, so to speak. So they have to be very careful. Another thing givers have to watch is they can feel guilty about their personal assets. And what I mean by that is they can be stingy with their family. They're generous with everybody else, but they're real stingy with the family. And that can create animosity among a family. If everybody else gets a high-quality gift, but the wife's birthday comes around and, she gets a flower and a trip to Taco Bell, there can be a little animosity built up there. You kind of follow me. A lot of times with givers, they focus so much on the giving that they ignore the closest people to them, and they get stingy with them, because in their mind, the more important thing is to give outwardly, not to hoard inwardly. But they got to remember their family deserves some attention too, and so they have to be careful of that. And lastly, Givers have to be careful. In the end, they have to remember it's about people, not projects. And a giver can get so wrapped up in projects that they forget it's all about people. Why do we remodel a church? Because we want to bring in more people. It's not the project. The people are the aim. The people are the goal. And sometimes givers can get wrapped up in projects and forget that the ultimate goal isn't the new carpet. And I mean, that's great, but the ultimate goal is to have more people come into the church and into the building. And so they have to remember it's people over projects. And that's something that they can sometimes lose focus of. And then last, I said that was last, this is lastly, and I kind of may mention this a while ago, they have to be careful that where people don't look to them instead of look to the Lord. When people know that someone is a giver and that someone has the ability and God's given them, bless them with the means to give, a lot of times they will go to them, and instead of seeking the Lord, they'll just bypass and go straight to the giver, and they'll start looking to them to meet their needs instead of looking to the Lord to meet their needs. And the giver has to be careful not to let that happen. That's why a lot of times they give in secret, because they don't want that to happen, but everybody knows secrets only stay secret for so long, and if, when people find out, they have to be careful of being looked at in a way like that. So that's the gift of giving, all right? That's the pluses, and that's some of the drawbacks you have to be careful of. Again, when you're talking about the gift of giving, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. All right, so there you go as a giver. All right, next, ruling or organization. You can call it either one, the gift of ruling or the gift of organizing. The person that fits this in the scriptures will not surprise you at all. The motivation to coordinate and lead the activities of others in the accomplishment of common goals. I can think of some of you right now that fit into this pretty well. The motivation to coordinate and lead the activities of others for what? The accomplishment of common. It's reaching the goal. That's what you're trying to do. One man put it this way: it's the God-given ability to lead, to identify objectives, and to help those involved in a task to accomplish them. Again, it's the ability to lead, identify objectives, and help those in a task to accomplish them. Now, verse number 14, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. And brethren, that's in there because a ruler has to be able to take criticism. Again, never met one yet that someone didn't have a complaint about. All right? They have to be able to take criticism. And they have to be able to do what they can do to make others happy and prosperous. All right? So when you're talking about being a ruler, let's look at some of their characteristics. By the way, in the scriptures, here's your example, and it fits beautifully. Nehemiah in the Old Testament. What did he do? Anybody know? Come on. What did Nehemiah do? He built the walls of Jerusalem. Absolutely. Do you think that was a task that required a little bit of organization? Yeah, just slightly. All right? And so Nehemiah is a great example of a ruler or an organizer. So number one, someone with this gift, they can visualize the final results. They have an ability to visualize that. They can see the finished project. In their mind, they can see it. They know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they're trying to achieve. It's not like they're making it up as they go. No. Before they ever start, they know what they want. In Nehemiah chapter 1, when Nehemiah's brother came into Persia and told him about the situation going on in Jerusalem, Nehemiah hadn't been there to see it. He had never laid eyes on the city of Jerusalem. He didn't know. All he knew was what his brother Hananiah told him concerning the Jews and the captivity and the city. And that's all he knew. And in verse 3 it says, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and the reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also was broken down and the gates thereof are burned with fire. That's all he had to hear. Man, if you continue reading there in Nehemiah 1, he got a burden, and that burden was he wanted to see those walls done. And never been there, but God laid a vision on that man's heart of what he wanted. And he was not going to be able to rest until it was done. He had to accomplish that goal. And so they were able to visualize the final results. They can see the completed task. Sorry, didn't mean to hit that. They need loyalty in their associates. They require loyalty in their associates. Loyalty is big to them because a task that needs to be done, he needs to know who he can trust to do it, who he can trust to delegate it to, and if he delegates a task to a person, they are loyal to finish what they are supposed to do. With a leader, that is huge. I mean, it's about the goal, and if they give you a task, they expect it done and done right and done as it's supposed to be and done as you're told to do it. That's a leader. They expect loyalty above all else. They would rather have fewer people than they can count on than a bunch of people they can't. You give them a small group of people they can count on, and they're ready to go at it, all right? That's what they're looking for. In Nehemiah, if you went into chapter 5, you would find Nehemiah dealing with the nobles and the leaders of Jerusalem. And he gets really blunt with them. And I mean, he gets right in the middle of them because there were some of them that were disloyal to their own people. And Nehemiah read them the riot act in Nehemiah chapter 5 and gave them a scorcher of a message to get them straight. Why? Loyalty. He got all over them because they were not loyal to their own people. And Nehemiah just tore into them for that. Loyalty is important. Number 3, they had the ability to delegate. They had the ability to delegate. They know what to delegate and what they can't. They know what to give away and what to hold on to. They know, I can trust this away, but this I've got to do myself. And as you look at Nehemiah when he was building the walls, Nehemiah, from just reading the scripture, Nehemiah didn't do as much building as he did other things. He delegated the building. How did he do that? By family. You go back and read it. Each family had a part of the wall they were responsible to build. It was genius. What was Nehemiah doing? Well, a lot of the time he was dealing with Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gershom, those 3 enemies of the Jews that he was going round and round with. He was dealing with them. Well, why? Because somebody else could lay a brick, but nobody else was going to deal with them. When it came to dealing with the enemies of the Jews, he would take care of that. You know, I can find someone to lay a brick, but I'm not going to send somebody else out to talk to that Ammonite. I'm going to deal with that guy myself. And so they had the ability to delegate, and they know what to get rid of and what not to get rid of. And when it came time to build, Nehemiah knew how to delegate. They can withstand reaction. They understand not everybody's going to like what I'm doing. Not everybody's going to like how I'm leading. Not everybody's going to like what I have to say. Nehemiah knew that. Once an organizer commits himself to a task, he will endure opposition to get it done. The task is the thing. And let me tell you, Nehemiah dealt with plenty of opposition. He dealt with it from the people around Jerusalem, and he dealt with it from the nobles within the city of Jerusalem. He dealt with plenty of opposition. He knows that without the continuous pressures that he must exert, the final goal will not be achieved. Nehemiah responded to persistent opposition. Just every time he turned around, he was having to come down off the wall and deal with somebody. It happened a lot. All right, Nehemiah got used to that. A lot of times these guys too, these people with this gift, they can make a job look easy. They can make a job look easy. An organizer has the ability to take seemingly impossible tasks and break them down into achievable goals. They had the ability to take, Nehemiah standing there, all right, we're going to build the wall. Most people look at that and go, impossible. How are you going to build this? That's an impossible task. Nehemiah said, no, it's really easy. This family's going to work on this 20-foot section. This family's going to work on this 20-foot section. And he took it and he broke it down, and by the time he was done, it was doable. That's what an organizer can do. He can take something that, or he or she can take something that looks absolutely impossible and break it down into tasks that are absolutely doable. And that is a gift. They're very alert to detail. They're very detail-oriented. They notice what others might think is a small, insignificant detail. They don't think it's a small, insignificant detail. What somebody else may glance over and say, that's good enough, they're going to go, no, there's no such thing as good enough. It's either right or wrong. They're very alert to details. They also tend to remove themselves from distracting details in order to focus on the ultimate goal. Not only are they very alert to detail, they do know what's useless. They do know what doesn't matter, and they will move themselves away from stuff because they'll think, this is holding me back. It's the main goal. And so they're very discerning when it comes to things such as that. They know what's important. They know the details that you can't leave behind. And they will remove obstacles in order to get something done. They will complete tasks quickly. I believe Nehemiah had the walls built together in 50-something days. That's pretty impressive, especially when you got farmers and iron workers and everything in the world out there building a wall. It wasn't like Jerusalem was full of bricklayers, brethren. It was people from every walk you can imagine, but they learned to lay brick. And he completed that task promptly and briskly, so much so that it scared the guys that were mocking him in the beginning were scared of him before it was done. You know, hey, if a fox runs up that wall, it'll knock it down. They weren't saying that when he was done. In fact, they were very intimidated when he was done because he built it so quickly, and it was done so quickly. Organizers can place workers according to their strengths and their weaknesses. They know they have a way of saying, you're good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this, and figuring that out and putting people where they can really excel. They're also able to be decisive. They know what the final goal is, and they'll make the hard decisions. They don't mind making the hard decisions because it's the goal. They're going to achieve the goal. And if that means they have to upset somebody along the way, they'll upset somebody along the way, but they're going to achieve the goal. They'll make the hard calls. And then completion involves cleanup. It ain't done till it's done. So if they're planning something, that involves cleaning everything up and being done. It's not just, all right, we got done, now we're going to leave it a mess. That's not an organizer. That's not a ruler because it's not done. The project's not done yet, all right? And so here's some misuses. You have to be careful because a lot of times organizers can forget people are people and people become resources. And instead of a person being a person becomes a resource. And they tag them as a resource, and that's how they use them. You have to. And every one of these gifts, you'll notice in one of the misuses, no matter how these gifts go, one of the misuses is always this: remember, you're working with people. Whether you're a prophet or an exhorter, no matter what it is, remember, people aren't projects. They're people. And that's what you have to remember. They will build loyalty with favoritism. They have to be careful because once they find a good worker and they're like, man, this person's a good worker, they're really beneficial, I could really use them to get a lot done, so I'm going to give them a little extra time at lunch, and I'm not going to give this guy because this guy's not near as good as this guy over here. If an organizer is not careful, they'll show favoritism to people that benefit them in trying to reach the goal the most. They're going to throw a little extra their way, and they'll start showing favoritism, and they'll try to build loyalty with favoritism. In other words, I want you to be loyal to me, so I'm going to be extra nice to you mentality. An organizer in charge of a work may single out individuals whom he thinks are very important to his goals, and he will show them partiality because in his mind they are very important to his goals. So you have to be careful. These people also can, if they're not careful, they can use delegation to avoid work. They can use delegation to avoid work. They just hand everything out and then have nothing to do. They have to be careful of that. It's easy for them to delegate the responsibilities to others. And if that's the case, they can be accused of being irresponsible. They can be accused of being lazy. So they have to be careful in that. They can also be unresponsive to appeals. When an organizer is in charge of a project, people can give him valid suggestions. People can appeal to him on certain situations. And he just closes their ears to their grievance because, hey, got to get the job done. Suck it up, buttercup. Finish the job. And they can shut off the appeals of people around them and not listen because it's all about finishing the job. Just grow up and do the work type mentality. And they don't listen. They can stop listening. They also can put projects ahead of people. They focus so much on the project that if something comes across as inefficient and disorganized, they can get very upset about said things, and they can put the project ahead of the people that are actually doing the work. They can overlook a serious fault in a worker. And here's what I mean by that. They'll appoint workers on the basis of their ability to get the job done. That's what's most important. Someone who's an organizer will appoint workers on one basis. They can get the job done. That's the most important thing to them. But what happens if that worker has a really bad moral problem? If they're not careful, they'll overlook moral issues and stuff because, well, yeah, he may have a moral problem, but he can get the job done. And that's because their drive is get the job done. That's what drives them. And so they have to be careful to not overlook serious character flaws in people just because they can get the job done. Brethren, this happens in sports all the time. They will overlook moral issues with these sports figures and these coaches that are involved in immoral things, but hey, they can run fast and catch a ball or make a basket and they get the job done. It's the same mentality, all right? Failing to explain or praise. An organizer's got to be careful because they see the final picture, but the poor guy working for them may not see the final picture. Not like they do. And so they will set them to a task without giving them enough explanation because to them, the final picture is clear. This guy over here is like, I really don't know what you're wanting. And so they have to make sure to explain. Not only do they have to explain, they have to make sure to give praise too, because when someone does a great job, the ruler's like, well, good, you did your job. Woohoo, all right, that's what you were supposed to do, all right? And there's no good job, there's no handing out roses because in their mind, what? You do what you're supposed to do. Why do I praise you for doing what you're supposed to do? That's what you're supposed to do. And so, get over it and do your job. So that's kind of how they have to be careful. They got to learn to hand out praise and pat people on the back and say good job every now and then because not everybody works with that mind that they've got, all right? And then they will force decisions on others. An organizer can misuse his special abilities of persuasion and decisiveness. He can coerce others to help him achieve personal ambitions. He's very good at coercing other people to get done what he wants. And then lastly, he can lose interest in the finished job. The fulfillment of an organizer is to see the job done. But sometimes before moving on to a new job, he needs to take proper provision to make sure the job he just did is maintained. So with him, it's all about the goal. Once he reaches the goal, it's time to go on to the next job. Maybe he needs to stop and make sure everything's in place to make sure the job he just did stays maintained before moving to the next job. But with him, it's the next job. Next challenge. What's the next challenge? Send me to the next challenge. Without completely making sure that the one he just finished is finished. All right? So that's the organizer. Now, lastly, mercy. Mercy, mercy, mercy. Definition: the motivation to identify with and share in the sufferings and joys of others as a comforter. The motivation to identify with and share in the sufferings and joys of others as a comforter. Or, as Scripture would put it, it is the God-given ability to empathize. Empathize, that's a different word. That's more than just comfort. That's empathize. That's putting yourself in their place. It's the God-given ability to empathize with the misfortunes and miseries of other people, to mentally and emotionally relate to their needs, and to be able to bring comfort through the Word of God. And believe me, not everybody can do that. This is a gift for sure. The verse to look at, Romans chapter 12, verse 15, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. That is what you do as someone with mercy. They will laugh when someone's laughing, and they will cry when someone's crying. All right, that's where they go with that. The merciful must be cheerful, uplifting, ready in mind to share the happiness of someone who's happy, but at the same time, they got to be ready to share the grief of someone who's in sorrow. And so, with that in mind, and many of you may know people that fit into this category, mercy. Let's think about this. An example, and this may be a little shocking, one of the sons of thunder. John, writer of the book of Revelation, nonetheless. But we'll look at a few things about John as we go through here. It might surprise you. All right. So John, someone with the gift of mercy, deeply loyal to their friends. Deeply loyal to their friends. A person with the gift of mercy will demonstrate loyalty to a friend by even reacting harshly toward those that attack him. Let me give you an example. When Jesus, in Luke chapter 9, when the people in this Samaritan village rejected Christ, it was John that went up and said, hey, why don't you just call down fire from heaven and burn them all? That's what he said. That was his response. When they rejected Christ, because why? He was deeply loyal to Christ. He was the disciple Jesus loved, all right? And so he said, and when the disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? You say, that doesn't really jive with this idea of mercy. No, people of mercy are deeply loyal to their friends, and if someone attacks the friend, they attack them. And they'll respond that way. Number two, they have an intense need for deep friendships. They have an intense need for deep friendships. I mean, they've got to have them. Got to have them. The very nature of a person with the gift of mercy their very nature requires close friendships. It just does. They want friends that have a mutual commitment. They don't want friends where they're more committed than the other person. They want a mutual commitment with their friends, all right? In other words, they want to know that their friend is as committed to them as they are to them, committed to each other. And by the way, again, it was John that referred to himself in his gospel. He referred to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. John had a very special fellowship with the Lord Jesus Christ, all right? He did. He had it, and I'm not saying, this isn't to say that, well, God loves this and more. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this. Different apostles had closer walks with the Lord than others. There was an inner circle, brethren. Peter, James, and John got to see more than the other ones did. Just that simple. And so there was a close relationship there, a close fellowship. Number three, they empathize with hurting people. They empathize with hurting people. The gift of mercy enables the one having it to sense when individuals are hurting, but not just sense it, they hurt with them. They literally share their pain. When someone is hurting, they hurt. It's not just pat them on the back and say it's going to be okay. No, if someone's heartbroken, they're heartbroken. Their heart breaks too. That's the idea. John wrote his first epistle. If you look at 1 John, as you go into the book of 1 John, here's the topics. Joy, fellowship, hope, confidence, cast out fear, cast out torment. The gift of mercy. Hope, joy, fellowship. You go through John's first epistle, and the whole first chapter is about fellowship and walking with the Lord. It's about a close fellowship. So definitely you see these things in John. Number 4, their decisions are based on benefits. And here's what I mean by that. Those with the gift of mercy find it hard to be firm because they do not want to offend other people. Therefore, the mercy must see that greater hurt and offenses will occur if he fails to be decisive. They'll defend their friends, but they don't like hurting other people's feelings. I mean, I'm not talking in a defensive mode. I'm just talking about overall here. If they have to make a hard decision, and it's going to be a decision they know that hurts someone's feelings, they'll just not make the decision. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. Even though the decision may be the right decision, even though the decision may be the biblical decision, they'll be careful about that. They'll base their decision not necessarily on what's right, but on the benefits that go with that and the results. Number 4, they are deeply sensitive to their loved ones. They are deeply sensitive to their loved ones. The gift of mercy carries with it the ability to sense genuine love. They know if they can sense it. It therefore carries a greater vulnerability to deeper and more frequent hurts. The one who loves more is going to be hurt more. Plain and simple. The more you love, the more pain will come across your way. Because they love so deeply, for instance, you know John used the word love more than any other disciple in his gospel and in his epistles. More than anybody else, John used the word love more. And when you love deeply, you can get hurt deeply. So they're very sensitive to that. They attract, people with the gift of mercy seem to attract people who have problems. They attract people who are in distress. They just it's not that they try, it just naturally happens. Somebody with the gift of mercy has a deep understanding of people who are going through distress. This sensitivity causes those that are hurt to be drawn to them. And not only be drawn to them, to confide in them, to talk to them. They'll say something like, I feel so comfortable talking to you. I feel like you can just understand everything I'm saying. And so, let me give you as an example. Who was the disciple standing next to Christ's grieving mother? Who was there available for Christ to hand the care of his mother over to? John. Again, close fellowship with Christ. The only apostle that was there. Okay? They have a desire to remove hurts. Whereas an exhorter tries to help a person learn from their hurts, someone with the gift of mercy just wants to get rid of the source of the hurt. It's not what can we learn from the hurt. Let's make you stop hurting. We want to get rid of the hurt. We want to get rid of the source of the hurt. And then they measure, a person with this gift measures how much you accept them by how close you are willing to get to them. In other words, they measure acceptance by closeness. A person with the gift of mercy tends to need physical closeness in order to be reassured of acceptance. Not just, physical. They want to be near you. The closeness includes times of fellowship. Who sat closest to Christ at the Lord's Supper? Who sat so close that he could lean over upon him? John. All right? Closeness. And then, lastly, they are, and why, I don't know, they are attracted to prophets. They are, which are polar opposites to mercy. You can't get more polar opposite to mercy than a prophet. And somehow, some way, they are just attracted to one another. You'll find many times in a marriage, not always, but if the husband's a prophet or the wife's a prophet, the other one, a lot of times, is going to have the gift of mercy. Because it just works out that way. Polar opposites. Here's some misuses. We'll go through these quickly and we'll be done. Someone with the gift of mercy has to be careful because they'll take up the offenses of others. They're so, especially if someone offends their friend, like what happened with Christ. What did the apostles do when that city in Samaria? Oh, well, Jesus says, call down fire and roast them all. They'll take up the offense of somebody else. They may not have been offended, but someone offended their friend, so they're offended. And they'll take that offense up. Boy, they got to be careful about that. The Bible says that taking up the offenses of another is like grabbing a dog by the ears and giving them a yank. I wouldn't suggest that. But that's what it's like. That's what the book of Proverbs says it's like to take up the offenses of someone else, to grab an angry dog by the ears. Wouldn't he say that's basically not smart. It's not a smart thing to do. Number two, they become possessive. They get very possessive of their friends. They're my friend. They can't be anybody else's friend. They're my friend. They're my best friend. They can't be anybody else's best friend. I see a group laughing. They become very possessive with their friendships. Their deep need for commitment to a close friendship can cause them to monopolize somebody and just want to be with them all the time and only them and, we're best buds and it's us two and nobody else. All right? Number three, they tolerate evil. If those with the gift of mercy do not have spiritual discernment as to why people suffer, they may give sympathy and encouragement to someone who's suffering as a direct result of sowing, and now they're reaping what they sowed. And it's like I mentioned earlier, if they're not careful, someone with this gift can literally get in the middle, get in between God and someone that's being chastised by God, and they can end up in the middle of it because God's trying to get someone's attention and bring them back, and the person with mercy is over here throwing water on it, trying to help the situation instead of let God get through. So someone with the gift of mercy, you got to have some discernment. Hey, is God dealing with this person? And if God's dealing with them, maybe I need to step back and let God deal with them. It would be like someone standing outside the pig pen trying to offer the prodigal son a plate lunch when God was trying to get his attention with the slop. You know, and so you got to be careful not to get in the way of God's judgment or get in the way of God's discipline. People with this gift fail to be firm. When a person with the gift of mercy is given a position of leadership, they tend to avoid disciplinary action when it's needed. The person who should have been disciplined is never brought to repentance because they're never disciplined, because the one with the gift of mercy, that's not their strength. Now, you bring a prophet in, yeah, they'll handle that, but sometimes they do it without love. So you got to be careful. Neither one of those is right. It's not right to be tolerant, but it's not right to discipline out of anger and not out of love as well. So both of those are wrong. They lean on emotion versus reason. Because of the gift of mercy it's so feeling sensitive, they tend to base their decisions on emotion rather than principle. Well, it feels right. Well, you got to be careful because not everything that feels right is right. So you have to be careful. Those with this gift, they're very feeling sensitive, and if they're not careful, their decisions will be made that way too. They can react harshly to God's purposes. Exhorters look at suffering as a means of receiving more grace and growing spiritually. That's how an exhorter looks at it. When you're suffering, hey, God's maturing you, He's growing you, and when you come out of this, you're going to be more mature and closer to the Lord. That's an exhorter, all right? Those with the gift of mercy don't quite look at it that way. And if they're not careful, they can have a bitter spirit towards God for what they see as something unfair happening to somebody. In other words, one of Job's friends could have said, Job doesn't deserve this. No, Job's friends didn't do that. They all told Job he was a rotten sinner and he deserved every bit of it. But one of Job's friends could have stood up and, what if they'd stood up and gone, Job doesn't deserve this. He's a good guy. God, I'm mad at you for what you're doing to Job. And that's the process. That's what I'm talking about. If they're not careful, when God's dealing with someone, they can get bitter at God for what they see as unfair treatment of their friend or of an individual. And then they can fail to show deference. For instance, when a person with the gift of mercy demands physical closeness in a friendship, he may fail to consider the desires of others who need that person's time. So they have to understand you have to share people. You have to share people. And someone with the gift of mercy has a problem sharing people. If they're not careful, they can want to, again, monopolize an individual. And they have to learn, no, that person has other people in their life who need their time as well. I can't be the only one there. And they have to understand that. And then lastly, the people with the gift of mercy, if someone comes across as insensitive or mean, they'll just cut them off. They'll just cut them off. A person whose words and actions reflect insensitivity to the feelings of other people, they will be quickly recognized. They will recognize them quickly and reacted to by one with the gift of mercy. Rather than trying to help the insensitive person, many times the one with the gift of mercy will just close their spirit off to them and cut them off and say, I don't want nothing to do with you. You're mean. I don't like you. You're mean to my friend. You talk mean to people. You hurt people's feelings. I don't like, instead of trying to help them, they just cut them off. Cut them off. Because that is the polar opposite to their gift. And so we'll conclude there. I know we moved through those quick, but I wanted to move through those last three tonight, and I know we moved quickly. But as we go through those, I hope as we went through those, you found yourself somewhere in there. All right? I will tell you this, if you're a child of God, you are somewhere in there. Somewhere. You're there. It may be kind of a merging of a couple here and there maybe, but one of them is going to be stronger. And the important thing is, once you found yourself, look at those characteristics and then look at how it can be misused. And make sure that you don't allow the gift to be misused in some way, but also it helps you understand, hey, God wired me this way to minister, and man, take advantage to use those gifts. The scriptures are very clear. We're to use the gifts we've been given for His honor and glory. He gave them to us for the purpose of using them, not hiding them. And so we're to use them for the glory of God and for the ministry. That's the reason they're given. And each church, as He adds to the church, and it's Jesus that adds to His church, and as He adds to the church, He adds to it just the right proportion that is necessary. In other words, brethren, you would never want to join a church full of prophets. Unless you're a prophet, and even then it'd probably drive you crazy. That would not be the friendliest place in the world to walk into, a church of prophets. All right, it just wouldn't be. But you wouldn't necessarily need a whole church of mercy either. You wouldn't want a whole church of rulers because nobody would want to listen to what anybody else had to say. All of them would want to take charge. All right? A whole room full of teachers, and you'd have a bunch of research and a bunch of knowledge, but no one to give it. And so God gives to His church proportionally and builds it with what He needs and what that church needs to thrive. And so keep that in mind. Whatever gift it is you have, don't discount it. Embrace it. God gave it to you to use in your local church because it's needed, or you wouldn't have it. And use that gift, just keeping in mind to not let the misuses of that gift get you. All right? Always beware. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll look at our prayer sheet tonight. Father, thank you for your word and what we learned from it. I pray now that you bless this time together as we go into our prayer time tonight. In Jesus' name.